Hey my peoples, welcome back to my channel and back to another new video. You know, I thought we were done with this topic. I thought we were done with this person, but apparently they're back. Not in a good way, like the Freddy Krueger, Jason type of way. So I was minding my own business, scrolling through my timeline on social media when I came across this headline stating that Lia Thomas, the trans-identifying male who won the NCAA championships in swimming, competing as a female, who was barred from competing in aquatics internationally thanks to a new transgender ban protecting biological female sports. Well, Lia Thomas is now challenging that ruling because Lia Thomas wants to compete at the Olympics because apparently competing against biological women and beating them on the national level wasn't enough. Lia wants to beat all women worldwide, the transgender way. So let's go over some of the information that I was able to find on this breaking news. This is what I found. This is from a website called The Advocate, and it states, former University of Pennsylvania swimmer Lia Thomas, who broke barriers as the first out transgender woman to win an NCAA swimming championship. I find issue with the word breaking barriers, please. It's not hard to break those barriers in the world that we live in today, where biological men are just pushing biological women out of the way. Make room for me. Okay, where was I? Has launched a legal challenge against World Aquatics, the body that regulates swimming competitions, with the Court of Arbitration for Sports, or CAS. Thomas's legal battle, which began confidentially in September 2023, seeks to overturn World Aquatics' June 2022 policy, which restricts transgender women from participating in women's swimming events unless they transitioned before the age of 12. Hey guys, Editing Chuck here. So my video temporarily went out, so I'm going to do this next part on voiceover only. So Thomas's team asserts that the policy is discriminatory and contravenes the Olympic Charter, the World Aquatics Constitution, and various human rights laws, including the European Convention on Human Rights and the Convention on Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. But you're not a woman. I'm sorry, you're not a woman. You're a biological male. You are a trans-identifying male. You are not a woman. This is the problem with this idea that if you say it, it is true. It's not. Biology still matters. Science still matters. So in this case, you do not qualify for this, Lia, because you are not a biological woman. This is meant to protect biological women in sports. You are not that. I'm sorry, you're not. You're a trans-identifying man. That's what you are. That's your title. Trying to assert yourself as needing protection as a woman is laughable. It really is. It's a slap in the face. It's abusing the system the way that it is right now, which is horrific. But you know what? It's what it is, right? Human rights. Human rights now means let biological men compete with women and beat them in sports and call that equality and progression and breaking barriers. In her CAS submission, Thomas recognized the importance of fair competition, really, and agreed that some regulation of transgender women in swimming is warranted, according to a CAS media statement. However, she contends that the challenged policy provisions are invalid and unlawful, arguing that they constitute unjustifiable discrimination. Unjustifiable discrimination. You want to know what's unjustifiable? The fact that a person who is over 6 foot tall, with a huge lung capacity, with long arms, big feet, big hands, all things that help swimmers. You have those attributes in your male body, and you were able to not only compete on the college level and beat everyone, but you also beat former Olympians. Like, let that sink in for a second. This mediocre male swimmer, because when Lia was still a dude, Lia was not good at all. Lia was moderate at best, middle of the pack. Nothing special, nothing to see here. And in the moment Lia became a trans woman, blew everyone out of the water, literally, including former Olympians. Thomas's NCAA career not only marked a personal triumph, but also ignited what has become a right-wing movement against transgender women in sports. Her historic NCAA win and subsequent ambition to compete in the 2024 Paris Olympics has placed her at the forefront of a contentious global debate over the inclusion of transgender athletes in women's sports. You know, I love how they throw in the whole right-wing narrative, right? It's forced right-wing people to come against transgender women in sports. No, it's caused logical thinking people to see unfairness and call it out. Now, if you want to call that right-wing, call it right-wing. Go right ahead. I call it common sense. I call it protecting biological women. See, the reason why women's sports even became a thing is because People back in the day understood that biology mattered and that biological women could not compete against biological men because it would be an unfair advantage. So they said, you know what? Let's let the ladies compete, but let's put them in their own category. That way it's fair and balanced. I don't know how we've come to this place in 2024 where that idea is now called discrimination. Blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. With no hearing date set yet, Thomas's case continues to be a significant focal point in discussions surrounding transgender athletes' rights. World Aquatics has not yet publicly responded to Thomas's legal challenge. And I believe that's the end of the article. And again, this isn't about transgender athletes' rights. This is about fairness. This is about making sure that we are allowing people to compete in fair sports. You know what's interesting too is that I remember an article last year of a swimming event which took place where they had a separate trans category for trans identifying individuals. And guess what? Nobody signed up. Not one person. See, I guess it's only fun beating women when you're competing against biological women. But it's no fun getting beat by other biological men who identify as women. Let's look at some news footage of this debacle. So this is from NBC News.
Back now, NBC News has learned that transgender swimmer Lia Thomas has quietly been mounting a legal challenge to rules that would keep Thomas out of the Olympics and other top-level competitions. A lawyer for Thomas says the challenge brought to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland looks to overturn rules issued back in 2022 that prohibit trans women from competing in women's swimming events unless they transitioned before the age of 12. World Aquatics, the group that made the rule, did not respond to NBC's request for comment. And those rules were issued just a few months after Thomas made history in March of 2022, becoming the first openly transgender woman to win an NCAA swimming championship. Let's bring in now NBC's David Noriega for more on the story. And David, where does public opinion fall on?
I'm sorry, but I'm so tired of this narrative too of she made history, she made history. If I compete against 6-year-olds, am I making history or am I just cheating?
On this issue right now, because most Americans at this point seem to support laws that protect transgender women from discrimination.
Right, Tom. So polling over the years has found some pretty complicated and at times contradictory opinions among Americans on various questions of trans rights. When asked in general terms, as you said, some 64% of Americans support laws protecting trans rights. But when asked in more specific terms about this question of trans athletes, 69% of Americans are of the opinion that trans athletes should only be allowed to participate in teams matching their assigned sex at birth.
Good.
That number has gone up in the years since Lia Thomas has become sort of a flashpoint for this particular debate. Now, what trans rights advocates would say is that in spite of the polling, these two issues aren't so easily separated because the debate around trans athletes and their participation in sports comes in the context of a pretty widespread campaign of anti-trans legislation. In Texas, for example, which is Lia Thomas's home state, Texas is one of 22 states in the United States that has passed laws restricting trans athletes' abilities to participate in sports. What trans rights advocates say is that particularly in the youth sports context, where sports are important for things like community and belonging and mental and physical health, this is excluding kids from participating in things that would be good for them and is part of this larger campaign that they say is designed to make their life difficult, if not impossible. Tom?
So what about the high school girls, the biological females, who are being beat in all of these sports like swimming and track and field and wrestling and these physical sports? What about them? Do they not matter? Because apparently they don't. Apparently it's all about making sure that trans individuals feel included, right? So in order to include them in everything, that means moving them into spaces, pushing females out, and then forcing those females to clap on the sidelines. Because if you don't, then you're a transphobe. Right? Like, this protection makes absolutely no sense. This protection argument makes no sense because it doesn't take into consideration the other side of the argument, which is the biological females who are being forced to compete against biological males. I don't care if you're on hormones. I don't care what the situation is. You are a biological male and you have advantages that female, that born female, does not have. What about their rights? Why is that always lost in this argument? Why? So in order to champion trans rights, we're going to ignore rules. We're going to ignore fairness in order to make less than 1% of the population feel happy and included. Screw the rest.
So this legal challenge actually started, as I understand it, back in the fall. Why are we just hearing about it now? And will it be settled before she were to go to the Olympics?
So the international body that's overseeing this case, by default, its cases are confidential. That's why we're only hearing about it now, because it leaked to the press, basically. And NBC has confirmed that information with Thomas's legal team. And the short answer is no. It is highly unlikely to affect Thomas's ability to participate in this year's Olympics, not least because she isn't registered currently with USA Swimming, the American swimming governing body. Now, whether it might affect her ability to participate in the 2028 Olympics here in LA, that remains to be seen. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it, David.
How embarrassing. How embarrassing that you were such a mediocre swimmer as a man that now you need to come into the female category and cause all this ruckus just to be seen, just to make yourself feel better, just to make yourself feel like you've made it, you've arrived. I mean, think about that for a second, right? When you were competing as a male, you weren't even ranking. You were so low, nobody knew who you were. Then you become a woman, and suddenly you shoot up to the top, and now you want to stay there. So now we're going to sue, now we're going to cause problems, do what we have to do in order to get me back on that podium. So I can feel included. And the hell with the other biological women who have been training their entire lives, who would never have the advantages that you have, Lia, because you have a male body. That's called biology. I don't care if that offends you. I don't care if that bothers you. I don't care. You have a male body. And by the way, you were competing as a male for years before you transitioned. So that means you have a double advantage because your body is already conditioned as a male athlete. Your body already understands the technique and the quality of a male swimmer and the strength of a male swimmer, and you're taking those attributes with you to the female side. How is that fair? In what universe? In what universe? There's one more video that aired, I believe, last week from Piers Morgan talking about this very topic, and a former teammate of Lia's back in college is speaking up as well about the situation. So let's watch that video as well.
Welcome back. Lia Thomas made global headlines when she became the first transgender person to win a national college title at swimming, leading to outrage from the women she defeated. She was ranked 65th when competing as a man.
65th.
She was banned from competing against biological women, but she's now mounted a legal fight to overturn the ban and has potentially the Paris Olympics in her sights. I'm joined now by the former teammate of Lia Thomas, Stand With Women's spokeswoman Paula Scanlon, Outkick's CEO Clay Travis, and political journalist and defender of the indefensible on these things, Ava Santina. So welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, if I may, Paula. You have competed against Lia Thomas. In your estimation, how unfair is it that Lia Thomas was allowed to compete against biological females and is now trying to seek legal redress to do so, but potentially removing one woman from the women's Olympic team?
Yeah, it's incredibly unfair. I think just looking at the situation, Lia Thomas was the tallest person on both the men's and the women's team at the University of Pennsylvania. Just the height difference, the muscle difference, the length in bones, the body shape, and also the hormones that males have that women don't. That was obviously a huge factor in Lia being much better than the rest of us. To put it into perspective, the University of Pennsylvania has never had an NCAA female champion until Lia Thomas came around. And I think that really shows that our program went from hardly ever having anyone qualify for the NCAA championship to having somebody win an event. And
you didn't actually compete against her, I think. You competed with her, is that right?
Yes, I swam different events than Lia, but I was on the same team.
Right. I mean, I've just seen, some of the video clips from some of the races she was in, both when she competed as a man and then as a woman. And the difference is just astounding. I mean, in one race, she was winning by over 50 seconds or something crazy.
Yeah, and in that event, actually, the second place finisher was a University of Pennsylvania swimmer that lost to Lia by over 2 laps in the pool.
And if you were
Unbelievable.
A member of the women's Olympic team for the United States, a woman, and you lost your place to Lia Thomas now, how do you think you'd feel?
I would feel terrible. And in fact, the girls that Lia beat when Lia won the 500-yard freestyle, the second, third, and fourth place finisher were Olympians themselves, some of which having medals. So it already happened, and it would definitely happen in the Olympics. And I think that would be a big scandal because it would affect not just NCAA athletes, but all women from all different countries that compete in the sport of swimming, and also in other sports that they allow this to happen in, they'll also be affected as well.
Right. Clay Travis, I've got a feeling in like 10 years' time, maybe sooner, we're going to look back on this period of the existence of planet Earth and think, what the hell were we doing? How was this insanity being allowed to happen? And it'll probably culminate in a 6'6" transgender athlete winning the 100 meters women's race at the Olympics by about 50 yards. I mean, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I give credit to
And when that happens, you'll have liberal women cheering.
Paula for speaking out and being willing to point out how ridiculous this is, because I do think it's going to take women athletes more so than people like you and me, Piers, who can look at this and talk about how ridiculous it is. But what we're starting to see is, in America at least, when Gallup polls this issue, increasingly massive majorities of the American population are saying this is wrong. And Piers, I don't even think you have to focus on sex itself. Obviously, men are bigger, stronger, and faster than women as a group. And by the way, that doesn't mean that some women aren't bigger, stronger, and faster than some men.
No,
which
but
is
it is why,
anecdotally
it is
how
just
people
on that
will
point,
respond.
it is why we separate the genders at the Olympics.
Hello.
I mean, if you made
Totally.
it gender, if you had what these,
there would never be.
if you had the woke dream of a gender-neutral Olympics, can you imagine how many actual women, biological females, would win a medal? I mean, literally, other than probably equestrian and shooting, maybe. That's it.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. There would be no women medalists. That's why the separation occurs. And by the way, Piers, what I focus on is I coach Little League sports. I've got 3 boys. If I showed up for 12-year-old soccer and I had a 16-year-old kid on my team, every parent would say, no, this is unacceptable. You can't do this. Can't do it for baseball, football, basketball. We have all sorts of changes to regulations. You can't be trans age, right? Like, I couldn't suddenly decide that I'm going to...
Or can you?
That's why they ask for birth certificates, so you can go try to win the Little League World Series, because otherwise people would cheat, you know? And if I suddenly said, I'm coaching, I'm about to head, as soon as I finish this interview, Piers, I'm going to go to 7th grade basketball and watch my 13-year-old son participate. If suddenly one of the coaches came out on the court, 6'4", and said, hey, I'm trans age now.
Right.
Sure, I'm 33, but I feel 13. Everybody would think it was ridiculous. It's just the very essence of sport itself.
Yeah.
Everyone but the left would think it's ridiculous because trans age actually is a thing, and he's not far off. Like, where we're heading, he's not far off. And that's the scariest thing of it all.
Okay, Ava, I'm looking at you frowning away here. Explain to me why this isn't just insane. That Lia Thomas, who, as we just heard, was not just the tallest boy in her college when she was competing as a biological male, but obviously the tallest girl as well. How can any of this be fair?
I think, okay, so this is a really interesting topic for someone who is gender critical, because on this show before we have discussed puberty blockers and whether children should be allowed access to them when they are 12, 13 years of age. Now, boys develop when they are 12, 13. The second that they start to have testosterone, that is when they grow bigger, they have a larger muscle mass than women. If you don't want to see trans women competing in women's sports, then you're going to have to allow young children who do not feel, who are experiencing gender dysphoria, to have those drugs when they're younger.
No, not at all.
No, darling, that's not how it works. You're not going to emotionally manipulate people and back them in a corner and say, well, if you don't want trans women as adults competing in these sports, then let's allow children to be mutilated and put on puberty blockers that are going to affect them long term. Because, by the way, there still is no long-term research for these children that are being put on puberty blockers now. We don't know the effects 30 years from now. We don't know. So the idea that she's trying to make this argument that, well, let's put kids on puberty blockers so that way when they're adults, they won't have gone through puberty, and if they identify as a woman, they will be more in line with the female biology. Doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. How about we stop putting men in female sports? How about that? How about we stop this delusion? How about we stop forcing biological women to be put in these situations in order to appease a political agenda? How about that? How about we not use children like she's trying to do as a weapon and politicize these children into having surgeries and being mutilated and being put on puberty blockers for the sake of a political agenda? How about that? How about we protect females in sports and also protect children? Can those two not exist?
My estimation, you do one of two things. It's very straightforward. This whole supposed insolvable problem is very straightforward. Trans women either compete against other trans women in an entirely new category, as
That's
there are more and more
available
of
to
them,
them.
as there are more and more of them competing, or they compete against their biological sex, because that is the biology they've been born with. Tell me why that's not fair.
I don't think it's fair that people who've experienced gender dysphoria when they're growing up and don't feel that they are in the right body should not be allowed to compete in sports. And if you're going to take away their
Why
rights...
don't you care? Look, you go on about women's rights, and a lot of the time I agree with you. I want women to enjoy utter fairness and equality.
I think this is fair.
How can you possibly sign up to something that is so grotesquely unfair and unequal to women's rights?
Because Lia Thomas didn't wake up one morning and suddenly decide, I'm going to be able to win in the women's category, so I'm going to
That's
switch.
exactly...
Who cares? Who cares? She's arguing feelings right now, right? She's saying, well, it's not fair for the person who feels trans to not be able to compete in these sports because then they're not going to feel good about themselves. And welcome to the real world. So biological women have to pay the price. So biological women must now step aside and lose their opportunities to advance the emotions and the mental stability of trans individuals. That's what she's arguing right now. That's what she's stating. So biological women must pay the price for biological men who want to be women. Because, by the way, this only affects biological women. Notice this phenomenon is not happening on the male side in sports. You know why? Because trans men or trans identifying women who want to be men, they can't compete against men at the same level and have anywhere near the same results that we're seeing on the female side. So this only affects women. This woman activist is literally saying, the hell with women, let's advance the emotions and feelings of these trans identifying men because they matter more. Their feelings matter more and they have hurt feelings. So let's all bend over backwards. Let's all change the rules. Let's tell women, move aside. That's what she's advocating for. She is probably the most dangerous person. The female liberal, I think, is the most dangerous person to this movement because women like her are why we're looking around and seeing what we're seeing. If more women spoke out and said, absolutely freaking not on my watch, you're not gonna do this, it's taking too long for women to even be seen in sports. And now we're gonna replace them with men and call that progression and call that women's rights. Women like her are the most dangerous people to women everywhere.
What she's
that's
doing.
That's not what happened.
That's what she's doing.
Lia Thomas, she is a woman, and so she is competing as a woman.
No, she's not.
She is a woman.
She's a trans woman.
We can go back and forth on
She's
this.
a trans woman born with a biological male body, which gives her an immediate, massive advantage over women who weren't.
So why aren't other members of her team happy that they're finally winning and qualifying for all of the things that they never qualified for
Because
before?
they can all see that it's unfair.
Is it not a little bit of jealousy?
No, it's just they know
Jealousy.
that at some stage Lia Thomas is going to probably win the Olympic gold medal.
No, that would be awful for America.
Yeah,
That would be terrible.
Here's why it's terrible. The United States women's soccer team, let's call it soccer for the benefit of this discussion, because they call themselves that.
Did she just imply that the women who have worked their entire lives in this sport are just jealous of Lia because Lia is a trans woman who's stronger and better and faster? Mind blowing to me. And she calls herself a women's activist.
in the world, the best women's soccer players on the planet, and they got beaten, I think it was 8-1 by the Dallas under-15 boys team, right? That is the point, is that it wasn't that the women's team weren't great as a woman's team at soccer. It's that put them against a bunch of kids who are male, with male physiology, they got hammered.
Okay.
That's why we separate the sexes.
So what do we say about trans women then? Do we just say they're not allowed to play sport ever?
I just told you what we do.
Is she...
They compete against...
Yeah, she's really dumb. I'm sorry. She is dumb. He literally just said, like 5 minutes ago, put them in their own category. Let them compete against each other. Let them be able to compete against their own biology. There's the answer. What part of that do you not understand, lady? Why isn't that registering to you? Why? You know why? Because she's arguing on feelings. Feelings over facts. That's why.
Biological sex, which is perfectly reasonable and fair.
That's not reasonable.
It's perfectly reasonable. By the way, solves the problem
And
of
also,
the dressing room too and who gets naked with
Let's
who.
talk about all of those teenage years where they would have been seeking medical treatment and they weren't allowed access to it. Now, that's happening in the UK, and it's happening very much so in the US. People are being denied medical treatment when they would like to have it.
All right.
And then when they get to of age, you don't let them play sports.
You and I are going to come back to this when someone like Lia Thomas wins an Olympic gold, depriving a woman of winning Olympic gold.
She is a woman.
And you're going to finally say, Piers, you were right all along.
She is a woman. No, she's not. A trans woman is different than a biological woman. I'm sorry, it's not up for debate. There is a clear difference biologically speaking. And the fact that this woman is trying to argue this point as if she's a woman, she's a woman, she's a woman. As if she says it enough, it'll make sense. It's not. Infuriating. I'm sorry. This topic infuriates me so much because it's just common sense. It's common sense. And when you have people arguing against common sense and they're actually biological women doing this, like, wow, you must really hate yourself. How would she feel if her daughter, if she has one, if her daughter was competing in sports? Her whole life competing in sports. Mom, I want to make the Olympics. Mom, I want to make the national team. All her life. And then all of a sudden, a trans-identifying male enters her league and wipes the floor with her and stops her daughter from being able to compete on the national level or on the international level and takes her spot. How would she feel? Would she tell her daughter, sweetheart, that's life. Their feelings are more important than your work? I mean, maybe she would do that. Maybe she would. Who knows? And no, the solution is not let's put all children who want to be transitioned on puberty blockers at age 6, 7, 8, and 9. No, not going to happen. We're not going to medically castrate children to make a bigger point about sports. Those aren't the options. Maybe they're your options, but they're not my options. Anyway, guys, this story obviously got me heated. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of this situation. Do you think Lia Thomas is going to win this argument and possibly be able to compete at the Olympics? I hope not, but it may happen. Who knows? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoy my content, please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you know when I post a brand new video. Until next time, peace.